We are about to go deep. Are you ready for this? We're going to learn today about facing trauma. We're going to learn today that your trauma is not your problem. Your trauma is your assignment. I just want you to let that sink in for a moment. That the bad things that happen to you are your mission and your purpose. I know life would be much simpler and more pleasant without your obstacles and your challenges and your struggles and the evil, dark, shady people that you encountered. But what we're going to learn today in the context of the Hanukkah discourse is that your troubles is your mission. It's very, very empowering, and it's very, very validating. Now, we're going to learn this idea with the context of Hanukkah. We are in the midst of a flow of a Hanukkah discourse delivered by the Rebbe in 1978. It's a mimer that's called Mitzvasa Mishatishka Hachama. The mitzvah of the Hanukkah lights is from the time the sun sets. We're in this book, and everybody today has a copy, thankfully. Here. Sefer Maimurim, it's on page 214. And if you don't have a copy, take one, please. This idea is very, very, very transformational. Now, we are going to dive a little deep, so prepare, brace yourself, put in your seatbelt, folks. We are going to dive a little bit deep. I'm going to give you a quick introduction. As to the topics that we're going to encounter. Now, even though we're going to be straddling both lanes right now, we're going to be talking about a personal level, and we're going to be talking about a spiritual level. On a personal level, we're talking about trauma and the dark parts of your life. We'll be talking about other applications of that concept. But on a spiritual template level, we're going to be talking about the divine energy in the various worlds. Now, don't get lost. Don't get lost in the spiritual terminology that we're going to encounter. It's not as difficult as it seems, but I thought it was important for us to have the books before us in order to be able to understand this. Now, in the last class, I did describe this idea verbally, orally, but now we're going to do it inside. Just a quick refresher in case you missed it. We're going to be starting off with a quote by King Solomon. The quote by King Solomon is that the purpose of the sun is when it sets, not when it shines. This is a transformational idea. One would normally think that the purpose of the sun is to shine. Comes King Solomon, as explained by the Zohar, that means that the purpose of the sun is when it sets. An example of what that idea could mean is as follows. Let's talk about having children, right? Having children, let's say a large family, is a financial drain, according to economists, right? A person might say, well, I don't want to have too many kids because it's going to tax my freedom. It's going to tax my disposable resources. I would rather enjoy my life. Now, I can see where that person's coming from, but the purpose of your life is not only to just shine your own light and enjoy yourself as much as it is to express yourself in the next generation, right? This is an interesting idea. Now, what happens if you're gonna have kids? It means you're gonna be woken up in the middle of the night. You're gonna have diaper issues. You're gonna have to run to the doctor. You're gonna have to pick up your kid when they're stuck at school and the teacher calls. You're gonna worry about homework. You're gonna have to go to PTA a few times too many, right? I mean, there's different headaches and issues. Little kids, little problems. Big kids, big problems, right? So you almost think like, why did I do this? But the purpose of our lives, we know there's a tremendous sense of fulfillment that we feel within our children. You know, talking to people on their deathbeds, they tell me almost always that the most fulfilling achievement in their life, their proudest moment, is their ability to have kids. And of course, if you don't have your own kids for whatever reason, people have their mentees and people have their nieces and their nephews and their other, maybe their charities. I know people that have a charity that they have adopted as their child. It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. It's actually a magnificent story of the Baal Shem Tov, who encountered a couple that could not have kids. So he told them that if they adopt Torah education in a particular town, then it would be that the children that study Torah as a result of their charity, it would be as if they are their children. And what happened was, at the end of the story, if you read the book, Lubavitcher Rebbe's Memoirs, I highly recommend this book, Lubavitcher Rebbe's Memoirs by the previous Rebbe's in English, two-volume set. What happened was that years later, all the kids in the town bore the names, many of the kids in the town bore the names of this couple that died without children. Like Yaakov Moshe and Chana Rochel or something, whatever their names were. So there were hundreds of kids bearing their names because they were the product of their philanthropy. And therefore the parents who were so grateful, they named their kids this way, so they became the progeny. So again, it doesn't have to be physical kids, it could be spiritual kids as well. Now, point being over here, that the purpose of it all, one could take the selfish route and say, I don't want to have kids, I don't want to be bothered. Or you can take the selfless route and say, I'm asking not what I am more comfortable with, I'm asking what I'm needed for. Ask not what America can do for you, but ask rather what you can do for America, right? So this idea is the same manifestation of what King Solomon is saying. He's saying the purpose of the sun is to set. The purpose of your life is not to just enjoy yourself and just indulge in as much luxury as possible, but rather to set to fulfill your purpose, right? And the way he's going to explain it now in the Maimer is using spiritual terminology, which really serves as a template. Even though we can't really relate to the examples that are about to be given in the case of the spiritual world, we can at least address them and read through it relatively quickly so that we can at least get some sort of orientation in the spiritual worlds. Bear in mind the following idea. It's a bit of a quick introduction to explain this ethereal concept here, and that is as follows. Because remember, let's not dumb it down, guys. We've got to raise the bar. This is not cotton candy Judaism. We're here to get the real deal, meat and potatoes Judaism, right? Where we're going to experience spirituality in its raw form without, sanitizing and diluting it to the point that it's almost unrecognizable. So let's talk about this. The idea is like this. You got God, who's infinite, and he creates a world that is finite. God, who is one, creates a world where God is hidden. How does this happen? It happens through a series of divine evolution, where God contracts himself. He self-contracts. A very simple example to understand this idea is that I am a mature adult, I hope, and if I want to have a tea party with my 2-year-old Goldie, right? If I want to have a tea party with my 2-year-old, then I'm going to have to suspend the rules of my adulthood, and I'm going to have to subject myself to the rules that the 2-year-old places upon me. No, Dad, Tati, you have to do this first, and you have to do that second, okay? And I'm going to subject myself to her etiquette and her rules, right, of her party, right, which is part of the pleasure of spending time with the kids. Beautiful, right? So what's the purpose? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want to engage with her in her world. And by the way, the same thing when I sit with my 16-year-old and I ask her if she can share some of her music with me. If she can talk to me about her world. In the 60s, to be a good parent meant that you didn't get divorced. If you didn't get divorced, correct me if you think I'm wrong. If you kept a roof over your head and you stayed married, you were a good parent. In the 90s, it was all about love. Just love your kids. It's not enough to stay married. You gotta love your kids. If you love your kids, you're in a good place. But in the 2010s, it's no longer about love. Maybe the 2020s. Now it's not enough that we need to love our kids. Now the kids want to know that my mom and dad get me. They get me. They live in my world. They understand me. They want to feel understood. They want to feel connected. It's not just enough to have a roof and to have to give them stuff and to pay their bills, but it's not even enough to love them. Today they want to feel like you understand them. So you got to climb into their world, and you've got to be able to suspend your values and suspend your mature aspirations for them and say, look, let me into your world. And when the kids today, when they feel that you get them, then hopefully they will want to get you. Right? Very interesting evolution of parenting. So when I sit with my kid, With my child, I want to suspend my rules, my context in favor of theirs. And God does the same thing for us. So God, who's infinite, suspends his infinity, self-contracts in a process called tzimtzum, and other fancy spiritual Kabbalistic terms like kav and reshimu and other words, whatever. And he creates various worlds. These worlds are new frames of reference. A world in Kabbalah is what I translate as a frame of reference, right? So whereas my 2-year-old is a frame of reference which relates to, the Tea Party, and my 10-year-old has a frame of reference that relates to the soccer ball, and my 16-year-old has a frame of reference that relates to Spotify, all right? And my frame of reference relates to, whatever I'm busy with, right? And yours is whatever you're busy with. These are the various worlds. Generally speaking, there are 4 worlds. There's Atzilus, which means emanation, Bria, creation, Yetzira, formation, and Asiya, which is action. 4 worlds, which basically represent the process of self-contraction to reach a point where we have zero consciousness and zero awareness of divine presence, where it's all about me. We live in a world which is entirely self-aware and zero aware of the creator of the world, right? You have to it takes meditation and education and contemplation and tragedy sometimes to be able to discover your creator. When it comes to this process, you would think that the higher the world, the higher the frame of reference, the better. Comes Kabbalah, what we're about to learn right now. No, the lower the frame of reference, the better. And in fact, where does God's essence manifest? In the lowest of the lowest worlds, in this physical world. Which means, when we do a mitzvah in this physical world, when you light a Hanukkah candle in your country club this week, what you're doing is that you're bringing God's essence into your country club. Now, this is a very important concept, because if you ask an angel, if you bumped into an angel in the world of Atzilus or Beria, in the frame of reference called emanation or formation, in a higher world, you would think, in Christian theology, like angels are like way higher than us. You'd think. In other theologies, again, I'm no expert in Christianity, but I believe that in other theologies, they believe that angels are much more higher or spiritual or holy than we are. Comes the Torah and says, oh no, they may be more aware than we are, but we are more capable of holiness than they are. Because when we do a mitzvah in this world, when we study Torah in this world, we are grasping God's essence into this world. They're only dealing with very diluted forms of God's energy. Just to give an example, so when I spend time with my daughter, with my 2-year-old, my essence is there. I mean, I love her. And I want to be fully present with her. My full attention is with her, right? When I'm ending a meeting early in order to make it to the tea party with my daughter, when I'm going through traffic in order to get to the tea party with my daughter, when I'm navigating a phone call in order to get to the meeting with my daughter, none of that expresses my fullest attention. Where is my fullest attention? It's on my daughter. Now, big 40-year-old man, 2-year-old girl couldn't possibly want to be spending time with this 2-year-old. No. That is the actual point. In the same way, that's a metaphor, life imitating art, art imitating life. God is infinite. And God, who does he want to hang out with? You. And me. Right? Greater than the gap between the 44-year-old father and the 2-year-old kid is the gap between the infinite God and the finite human being. And this is where God wants to hang out with, right? So what we're about to learn here in this flow is that the purpose of it all is the lower world. Like King Solomon said, the lowest world, the lowest frame of reference. Like King Solomon said, the purpose of the sun is not when it shines. The purpose of the sun is when it sets. There's one more example that we're about to bring, which I want to explain. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you the question about what you're saying about God. Is that an assumption you're making because he's infinite and we don't know God, or how do you know that what you're
How
saying?
do I know this information? Well, bear in mind, I'm not making any of this up. I am, that'd be pretty cool if I was making it up, actually. I'd be pretty enlightened. But yeah, what I do is I'm just a teacher of Torah. I'm just a teacher of Torah. I'm taking Kabbalah, okay, Kabbalah and I'm sharing it. Kabbalah is in Aramaic. It's in other languages. It's in different contexts. The examples I give are my own. Yes. The examples I give are my own because I'm a resident of Palm Beach, of this world of 2025 almost. And I am using my awareness of this world to try to take spiritual truths and explain them in manners that are relatable. But none of the stuff I'm making up. How do they know? Whoever wrote this, they know because they were men of God and they were seers, they were prophets that were able to have access to the Kabbalistic wisdom, which was secrets that were passed on from God to Moses on Mount Sinai all the way down to us. Okay, good. So another example that we're going to be giving in just a moment is the example of within our own minds. What happens if you want to say something? If you want to make a speech, just think about this for a moment. Imagine you walk into shul and the rabbi says to you, Mike, I want you to make a speech. When? Now. What about? I don't know. Just say something, right? Just say something profound. What's going to happen in that moment? And the rabbi then says to you, you know what, Mike, I'll give you 60 seconds. What happens? Right? What happens in those few moments? What happens is that you're like, oh my God, I got to think of something to say, right? I got to think of something to say. And you're going to go through a process where you're going to think about whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind. You're going to think about your emotions. And then you're going to process those emotions. You're going to process your emotions. You'll be like, maybe I'm angry about what's going on in Yemen. Maybe I'm happy about what's going on in the election. Maybe I'm depressed about what's going on in the economy. Maybe I'm upbeat about what's going on somewhere else in my family, right? You're going to take your emotions and then you're going to channel those emotions into your speech, right? This is a very interesting process, an internal process of evolution, where just like God's infinite energy goes down into this world's frame of reference, so to within myself, I have the same exact evolution, where I'm going from an idea that is, that is clear within me. And then I'm going to think, well, how am I going to find the words to express this idea? I'm going to have to channel emotion into speech, right? So I'm going to pick an emotion. I'm going to temper that emotion with maybe another emotion, maybe kindness with compassion, maybe triumph with humility, whatever emotion. You have 7 emotions. And I'm going to channel, it's really 6 emotions. I'm going to channel them into the 7th emotion, which is communication, right? In exactly the same way, within the world of emanation, within God's energy called Atzilus, the world of emanation, you have something called the emotions, and you have God's expression. So these 2 terms, I'm going to give you this Kabbalistic term. They're called midos. Midos means emotions, and malchus, which translates as kingship, really means communication. So you get emotions and communication, right? Don't get lost with the terminology. You can easily define this. You can own these ideas. You too can be a scholar. Just take on these words and introduce them into your lexicon. There's midos, emotions, and there's malchus, which is communication. Now, when emotions descend into communication, are they descending? Yes, they are descending, because when my emotion is within me, it's on fire, and when I'm expressing it, it's far more limited. When I'm speaking an emotion, I can't express everything I feel. I just can't do it. I cannot possibly. Imagine you talking to your wife, right? Talking to your wife, and she's like, why don't you ever tell me how you feel about me? Have you ever felt this? And you're just like, why don't you tell me how you feel about me? And you're like, I'm lost for words. I don't know how to express it. Keith, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're like, you want to express that emotion, but it's like, it's in here, but you just don't know how to put it out here, right? You see what I'm saying? And then you're like, you try, and it just doesn't flow that easily. It's not easy to express your emotions, right? So, because emotions are much easier when they're contained within yourself than when you manifest them outside. So what I'm saying now is that when God takes his, through this process of evolution, of divine descent, like the dad hanging out with the 2-year-old, when God constrains, self-constricts his energies into the lower frame of reference of the child, or in our case of the mortal, then what happens is that God takes his emotions, which are on fire, and he puts them into this little bottleneck called malchus, which means communication, which then becomes the window to the next frame of reference called the world of formation, Yetzirah. And the same thing happens. It goes into the intellect and emotions of that frame of reference, and that bottlenecks into the communication, which is the lowest level of that world of formation, down into creation, and then down into action, all the way down to this world. So there's a series of constriction and diffusing of the energy. What we're about to say is that though one might think that the emotion manifesting through communication is a restriction of the emotion, it's actually the purpose of the emotion. Just like King Solomon said, that the purpose of the sun is not when it shines. The purpose of the sun is when it sets, right? And how this all ties into trauma, making it personal, is that I'm covering a lot of topics here, but how this all ties into trauma is that within my own life, there's the parts of my life which are illuminated, joyous, cruise control, free flowing, and then there are parts of my life that are painful, right? My interpretation of what the discourse here is telling us is that the purpose, what King Solomon is telling us, is that, and again, it's a template of the spiritual Kabbalistic terminology, which manifests in our personal life. The purpose of Chassidus is not to learn the Kabbalistic terminology and keep it Kabbalistic. The purpose is to apply. That's the meaning of the word das. Remember, Chabad is 3 letters, 3 words. Chachma, Bina, Das, which means to conceive the idea, to understand the idea, and to feel the idea. You cannot feel an abstract concept. You can only feel a personal concept, right? You have to make it personal. If you're not making it personal, you're a chab, you're not a chabad. Chab is chachma bina. Don't be a chab, be a chabadnik, right? Don't be a chabnik. A chabadnik, right? Is what it is. You gotta be a thoughtful, mindful, conscious being who takes concepts, abstract ideas, and applies them personally. So how do you apply this concept personally? Into trauma. Because one might think that the dark parts of my life are the parts that I'm trying to run away from. Comes Chassidus today and teaches us, no. Don't run away from your problems. They're your purpose. They're your destiny. If your marriage isn't exactly a bed of roses, fix it. Invest in it. Make it work. If your business isn't working out as great as as it should have, don't just give up. Don't do don't just terminate. Do what you can to fix it. If by divine providence you were sent into this place, do whatever it takes to fix your problems. See what you can do to repair it. If you've experienced trauma and difficult times in your life, then don't necessarily run away from those problems. See what they have been sent to you to teach you, to sensitize you, to make you aware of, right? Think of people that have been through addiction and how they have found through their healing the most incredible sense of awareness and sensitivity and kindness and so on. So with this long introduction, folks, I'm going to try to read this inside the text on page 214. We've got the general overview, and let's try to read it in the text, okay? This gives us greater insight into the statement of the Zohar, quoted in discourses of the previous Rebbes. The verse states, which verse? This is the verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 5. It says, the sun rises and the sun sets, and it yearns for its place where it shines. What does it mean? This is from King Solomon. What does it mean the sun rises and sets, and it yearns for its place where it shines? On a simple level, this means that after the sun sets, it yearns for its place, the east, where it will rise again the next morning. However, no. The Zohar teaches us that what King Solomon means is something exactly the opposite. On a deeper level, the Zohar explains that its place refers to the west, not to the east, to the setting, not to the rising, to the place where it sets. In other words, in the words of the Zohar, when the sun goes towards the west is referred to as the place of the sun. The west is referred to as the place of the sun, meaning the proper place of the sun is to the west, is the west where it sets, not the east where it rises. This is why the sun moves toward the west over the course of the day, right? Think about it. When the sun moves east to west, it's working towards its destination. It's working towards its goal. So the sun yearns to reach its sense of fulfillment. The deeper meaning of this statement of the Zohar is as follows. What we're about to explain is that the purpose of the sun is not its own expression, but its own purpose. It's counterintuitive. What it's teaching us is that it's going to teach us now is that the role of the higher power is to illuminate the darkness below. That's what we're about to learn. It's a transformational idea in our lives. And don't feel bad if this is not something which is sinking into your consciousness on the first run. You might need to watch this video a couple times and to read this text even more times, because this is a truly game-changing idea in our lives. The West, on page 215, the West refers to the attribute of Malchus, royalty, and I translate royalty as communication. As the Talmud says, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is in the West, and the Shekhinah refers to Malchus. And the sun going towards the West, as discussed by the Zohar, refers to the descent of the 6 Sephiros, the attributes, the midos, the emotions, known collectively as the Er Anpin, referred to as the sun, into Malchus. Don't allow yourself to get lost in the terminology. What this means is that there's emotions, there's 6 emotions, which get expressed into communication. Just like when you're talking to your wife and you want to let her know how you feel. You have your emotions. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you're disappointed. Maybe you're elated. Maybe you're so in love that you just don't find the words. There's a lot of emotions that you could be experiencing. Right? And those emotions need to express through communication, through Malchus, because if you don't use your mouth, your what he calls the attribute of royalty. I'm not going to get it stuck into why royalty is communication. That's a different conversation we can have another time. I'm trying to keep the flow here, right? The idea is that emotions have to manifest through communication. And just like the sun needs to set in the West, and that's the purpose of the sun, which the sun yearns for, so too the emotions are looking to set. They're looking to wane into communication so that the other person knows how I feel. In addition to descending into the higher level of Malchus, as it functions as a recipient in the greatest spiritual world of Atzilus, there's 2 parts to communication. Remember, when we said how each frame of reference, each world becomes the bottleneck, and then becomes the opening of the next world. So the lowest part of the higher world is the highest world, highest part of the lowest world, right? So when you communicate, if I have emotions within me, and I express them to Mark through my communication, then Mark is getting only the bottom of the barrel of my emotions, because only the part that I was able to express to him is what he's beginning to relate to. Now imagine he takes that and expresses it to Toby. So Mark is taking his diluted understanding of my emotions, right, which is the beginning of his feelings, and he's going to say, I think what the rabbi's talking about is X, Y, and Z. So now he's communicating to Toby, who wasn't even here when I was talking, let's say, right? He's going to communicate to someone else what he felt that I said. So you see the dilution. Every time you communicate, you're creating a floor of this world and opening up a new frame of reference, right? Before it was David, now it's Mark, then it's Toby, it's someone else, right? So that's what happens. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, emanation, creation, formation, and action. These 4 worlds go through the constriction, right, of communication. So there's the higher part of Malchus and the lower part of communication of Malchus.
Is that where the framework of Kabbalah with this all look that way?
Yeah, artistic impressions. Yeah, so there's 2 parts to communication. There's communication in its higher part, which is how I am communicating within myself, and then there's the lower part of communication of Malchus, which is how you are hearing my communication. So there's how I'm expressing communication, and then there's how you are hearing communication. That's what he's going to say right now. Again, don't get lost in the technical. It's not that difficult. In addition to descending into the higher level, in addition to descending into the higher level, you know what, Marty, I want to tell you something very important. Here you are. You thought you retired from your big company at Johnson & Johnson, a very important role that you had over there, which is amazing. We're not here. Welcome to Chabad Palm Beach Gardens, where we don't dumb them down, right? We're here to challenge you. We're here to make life even more exciting and more meaningful to you. And that's not going to happen by making life easy for you. So I'm going to make it challenging for you in order to bring out your skills and your talents, because there's so much life left in you. And if you don't squeeze yourself, you're not going to be able to manifest this. I'm challenging you here today. Yes. In addition, keep on going. I want to try to finish this flow. In addition to descending into the higher level of communication, which means as it functions as the recipient in the greatest spiritual world of Atzilus. In other words, communication the way I understand what I'm about to communicate. It also refers to the lower level of Malchus, which is what my listener is hearing, which after receiving everything it can from the 6 attributes, descends and becomes the source for the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, known collectively by the Hebrew acronym Biyah. Basically, when the listener, the next frame of reference, is hearing what I have to say, then my words become the origin of of that world's frame of reference of the listener. Once it descends into these lower worlds, the light of Atzilus is now considered to have set. So my emotions have set because right now it's in him. My emotions are in him, and therefore my emotions are done. His emotions are beginning to rise. It's a lower frame of reference. It's a lower world. It's a listener vis-a-vis a speaker. So like the setting of the sun, because they're no longer revealed within these worlds. Now, although the son of Atzilus, Zeir Anpin, also known by the acronym Zah, has set, it is no longer revealed after it descends by way of Malchus into the lower worlds. The place to where it descends is referred to as its place. So even though the sun sets in the west, even though the emotions have now expressed themselves in communication and the emotions are now no longer shining, all that's shining is words of communication. So it's set. Nevertheless, this is called its place. This is what King Solomon says. The purpose of emotion is to constrict, is to contract within words, because that is where it can reach its ultimate purpose. The purpose of emotions is not just to have emotions. The purpose of emotions is to communicate emotions. The ultimate purpose of the emanation of the spheres of Atzilus is to create the world of Biyah. Now, in addition to being their true place, despite the concealment involved in their descent, their ultimate shine, revelation, will be accomplished through their descent into the lower worlds, as will be explained in the following paragraphs. So here's what it's going to say something fascinating right now. Not only is the purpose, is the true place, not only is the true place of the emotion within words, not only is the true within the limitation of the words, not only is the purpose of the sun when it's setting in the west, not only is the purpose of all of my wisdom when I teach it, right? So not only is that the true place of my wisdom in my students listening, right? That's in addition to that being the true place of my wisdom, right? As of the teacher. Also, it's their ultimate shine, the ultimate expression of the speaker, of the teacher, is when he's manifesting in the listener. I'm going to say that again slowly. The ultimate purpose of the teacher is when he contracts his wisdom into the minds of the listener.
Sure.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You can relate to that.
Yeah, you use that, that analogy with Einstein teaching class.
Now, I can understand why Einstein would not want to teach us. If Einstein walked into this room and he decided, and we asked him, Einstein, why don't you teach us why you said E equals MC squared, right? He'd be like, you know what? No thanks. Right? The wisdom would stay within the mind of Einstein, right?
But he'd have to dumb it down for us.
He would have to dumb it down for us. I mean, that would be like humiliating for him. It would be humiliating. If he had to explain to me what he was talking about, it would be a depressing descent within his mind. However, what King Solomon is saying, you don't think so? You don't think it would be a depressing descent?
No, I think he's sharing his wisdom on a level.
Well, you know what? Whatever you'd be hearing from him would be far, far, far less radiant than what goes on in his own heart.
Oh, of course.
So it's depressing descent.
But it's understandable.
But that's the point. But you agree with me. But look, I'm using the word depressing to trigger your emotion. I'm using the word depressing on purpose because, I gave an example in the last class of the Rebbe refusing to acquiesce to become the leader of the Chabad movement for an entire year. And my understanding of that is, why should I do that? Because it is depressing. To imagine if I could sit all day long, wrapped in prayer and meditation all day long. I think I'd be able to reach a lot more than if I was spending time with my students. More spiritual heights I'd be able to reach. I would think. I don't have to deal with people asking me questions that I don't like or not interested in, or schedules or meetings or things. I'll just be able to do my own thing, right? And I think that the Rebbe also, I feel, this is my own interpretation, folks here, okay? I feel that the Rebbe was like, let somebody else do it. The Rebbe was so humble. He's like, somebody else could do a better job. When the Rebbe realized that there really wasn't anybody else to do a better job, he realized, okay, I have no choice but to do this. There is a certain depressing component to that because, a person who is content with themselves, they don't need to be sociable. They don't need to be hanging out with other people. They have so much light and illumination and radiance and joy and fulfillment within themselves. They don't need to get that validation from someone else. They're not codependent. They don't need somebody else to validate their existence or their achievements or their accolades. So when you're expressing in someone else, there is a compression of that emotional wisdom. And Einstein's talking to me or you, we're only going to get a fraction of his wisdom, right? So there's a contraction. However, we can all relate to the fact that that's really the point. The point is to communicate your ideas, because if you just keep it to yourself and you take it with you to the grave, then what have you really done, right? So you see what King Solomon is saying. He's saying the purpose is to descend beneath yourself, to shine the light where it's dark, to illuminate the mind of the listener, right? That's what King Solomon is saying. It's a beautiful concept here. And I'm applying it to trauma in our lives. I'm applying it to the dark parts, the shadows, the closets of our lives, right? So in the metaphor, I'm going to talk, how do you say it? In the analog, but again, life imitating art, art imitating life. When God creates this world, God does so by self-constricting himself. And he does so with the purpose of establishing a full relationship with us. Because who does he care about most? Not the angels. He doesn't care about the disembodied souls up there in heaven somewhere. What he cares about is us on this physical earth. Because this world is the ultimate purpose of it all. This is where he wants to engage with us. This is where God wants a home. So therefore, just like God self-constricted in order to reveal his essence in this world, when we teach, when we manifest our emotion, when we express our feelings or wisdom into communication, even though that's a contraction, what you're doing is not only is that your place, it's actually what's going to bring out the best in you. So just like God's essence is revealed when God is in this world, when we do a mitzvah in this physical world, we bring God's essence, what cannot be achieved in any higher, loftier frame of reference, in any higher, loftier world. So too, when we choose to illuminate the darkness in our lives, whether that's a listener, a student, a mentee, or our own personal darkness, trauma, what we're doing is that we're actually coming to our purpose and fulfilling our essence, expressing our essence. This is such a deep concept, folks, but it's really so beautiful. Are you losing me here, Rob?
I'm a little busy. I'm a little
Oh, does
busy.
he? You know, Dramamine.
I just
Okay.
try.
Yeah.
So,
Is yours? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. You have a question? I think I'm going to stop it over here because I don't want anyone to have an explosion here. So I'll give you some time to meditate on this idea. All right, guys, I'm going to end it over here. Everybody online, good to see you all. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll end it over here.